My Lords, it's a sign of the jittery state we're in that a slower than expected slowdown in...
Neither of them ended up by inviting the other one up for a coffee or a drink at the end of the evening, and they didn't exchange telephone numbers in order to be able to follow up the call. In fact, I found myself between a rock and a hard place, represented by both a rock and a hard place, which were totally paranoid about each other, because the Foundation X people have got an amazing obsession with their own security. They are expecting only to be contacted by somebody equal to head of state status, or somebody who has an international security rating equal to the top 6 people in the world. And this is such a strange situation. So both the noble Lord Sassoon and the noble Lord Strathclyde both came up with what should have been an absolute killer argument as to why this could not be true and we should forget it. Noble Lord Sassoon's argument first was that these people were offering evidence, or they claimed evidence, that they had lodged £5 billion with British banks last year. And they gave dates, and they gave transfer dates and the details of these transfers. And as noble Lord Sassoon said, if that was true, it would stick out like a sore thumb. You couldn't have £5 billion popping out of a bank account without it disrupting the balance sheet completely. But I remember that about the same time that those transfers were being made, the noble Lord Myners was indulging in his game of rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic of the British banking community. And if he had had 3 banks at that time, which had had, say, a deficiency of £1.5 billion each, then you'd pretty well have absorbed the entire £5 billion, and you wouldn't have the sore sum stick out on this at that time, because you'd have put £1.5 billion into each of 3 banks, and you'd have lost the lot, or absorbed the lot. That would be a logical explanation. I don't know. Noble Lord Strathclyde came up with a much different argument. He said, this cannot be right. This cannot be right, because these people said at the meeting with him that they were still effectively on the gold standard from back in the 1920s, and that their entire currency holdings throughout the world, which were very large, were backed by bullion. And the noble Lord Strathclyde came back and said to me, he's had his analysts working on it, and this has to be stuff and nonsense, because he said they had come up with a figure for the amount of bullion that would be needed to cover their currency reserves as claimed, which would be more than the entire value of bullion that had ever been mined in the history of the world. I'm sorry, but the noble Lord Strathclyde is wrong. His analysts are wrong, because what he had done was he had tapped into the sources which are available, and there is only one definitive source for the amount of bullion that has ever been taken from the Earth's crust, and that was a National Geographic magazine article 12 years ago. And whatever figure it was that they quoted was then quoted again by 6 other sites on the internet, on Google, and so everybody's quoting one original source, and there is no other confirming authority. But if you tack into the Vatican accounts of the Vatican Bank, you come up with a claim of total bullion.
The noble Lord is into his 15th minute. I wonder if he could draw his remarks to a conclusion.
The total value of the Vatican Bank reserves would claim to be more than the entire value of gold ever mined in the history of the world. Now, my point on all of this is that we have not proven any of this. Foundation X are saying at this present moment that they are prepared to put up the entire £5 billion for the funding and creation of the 3i recreation. The British government can have the entire independent management and control of it. They don't want anything to do with it. There will be no interest charged. And by the way, if the British government would like it as well, if it will help, they will be prepared to put up money for funding hospitals, schools, the building of Crossrail immediately with 17 billion transfer by Christmas if requested, and all these other things. These things can be done if wished, but we have to have a senior member of the government has to accept the invitation to a phone call to the chairman of the company concerned, Foundation X, and then we can get into business. And all I'm asking is that this is too big an issue. I'm just an ageing, obsessive old peer, and I'm easily dispensable, but getting to the truth is not. And we need to know what really is happening here. My Lords, we must find out the truth of this situation.
My Lords, back to the spending review, which is an understandably tough settlement for the public sector. And the reasons for cutting back the overall deficit are clear in the face of the largest budget deficit in peacetime history. Cuts, my Lords, do, however, need to be fair, and they also need to be deliverable. And, my Lords, may I declare my interest as a member of Newcastle City Council and